Hello guys, I'm back again, and this time is with Mark, so I'm just waiting for Mark to join. Super excited about today. I don't know if you guys know about Mark, but Mark is my go-to person for everything legal. He's been a good family friend and the best legal advisor you will ever find, to be honest. Let me see. Just waiting for Mark to join. Hi back, Maria. Thank you for joining. Okay, let me check again. I think he's still not online. Hi, Ahmed Fikri. Thank you for joining. Always supporting the team of Sanduq Al-Watan, mashallah. Fatma Al-Madani also, hi. I miss you. Okay. Bear with me, guys. I'm just checking on Mark. Fatma, you're next. You're next on two people talking, so get ready. And also Ahmed Fikri. There's so many exciting things Sanduq Al-Watan are doing, and it would be great to, share that with people and get them engaged. Mark has officially joined, so I'm gonna add him. Let's see. Waiting for Mark to accept.
Hello.
Hi, Mark.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. You just missed out on something really important.
Oh, what was that?
I was just saying to the followers that you're my go-to guy for everything legal. And you've been a great family friend. And, I'm very excited to be having this session with you today.
I know, strange old world, but yes, it's very nice to be having a chat and a cup of tea in my case.
I know, but I think you have fun telling people about all the legal stuff because that's your experience. So
It is,
I
that is true. Yes, that is true.
So I have a couple of interesting people who've asked me questions before, but before we go into the conversation, Mark, if you want to give like an executive summary of who is Mark.
Of who I am, right? Okay. So my name is Mark Hill. Yep, I'm a partner in an international law firm called Charles Russell Speechlys. I head up the Middle East commercial team for them, and that covers all trading activities, but particularly with my experience over the last 32 many years, going into technology, creative industries, culture sector, anything operating within the online digital context. And my operation runs primarily across the Middle East, although I do have some responsibilities internationally. We've got offices all around the world, so I do work with London quite a lot in things like content production, film, anything that's kind of hard creation. I've got some responsibilities there, and also internationally in relation to retail brands.
Mark, you
So
should tell them how many years you've been in the UAE.
I've been here a while. I started, let me think. I started coming here to work in the mid 90s, and then I moved here in the late 90s, set up my own firm, operated as a boutique, and then almost 2 years ago now, rolled my entire team and clients into Charles Russell Speechlys. Small and beautiful is wonderful, but the world gets harder and harder. So, which is what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, I think Mark, you are so nice and so down to earth, but I know that you played a major role in so many interesting things in the UAE when it comes to legal things and frameworks. And I'm very proud to say that, or to know someone who actually played a major role in that. And I know not a lot of people know that, but that's Mark for you. And the fact that you spent so many years in the UAE and gives a better perspective to any prospective business owner or a client, because you have, you know, international laws and you have the local laws and you understand everything in between. So I think it's very important when working with any legal advisor to have that, you know, understanding.
Good. Well, thank you. You're always very kind. You know, but yeah, I mean, I came to the Middle East. I mean, fundamentally, I came to the Middle East to get things made, to get projects moving. I thought that, I mean, a lot of people have asked me why I came to the Middle East and have dedicated so much of my career to this region. And it's a variety of things. But one of the things that I think is remarkable about the region is the degree to which opportunity is available. Now, okay, you might say opportunity is available in many areas around the world. However, I mean, the Middle East has got a real solutions-orientated approach, I have found. So I looked at a lot of regions when I decided 20-odd years ago where I was going to go. You know, I had the international bug, so what was I going to do? Where was I going to go to make a difference? But the thing that really attracted me about this region was as I say, the can-do mentality, the can-do attitude, and that's why I'm still here.
I think now we need to jump into some serious topics. And I know a lot of people, when they talk about legal stuff, they get terrified. But these are things that are very important to be addressed. I wanted to ask you about, sorry.
No, go on.
I wanted to ask you about the importance of, you know, when someone starts a business, an entrepreneur, or even like a successful businessman or woman who's starting a new business, why it's very important to get all the agreements in place when it comes to partners and co-founders, especially in settings. I see this a lot more in family and friends, when family and friends are partners.
Yeah. People, I tell you what people do. They get uncomfortable about the fact that there are what they perceive as being difficult conversations to be had. And then secondly, I think we've talked about this many times before, they worry about how it might infringe on the trust arrangement. So a lot of people, whether they are friends, whether they are family, they have this idea that it's better, you know, to rely on the trust and not talk about things and so on. For me, it's the wrong way around. So I think relationships are super important, and being clear, even on a simple basis. I'll tell you what I think a contract is in a moment, because you're right, people do get very scared about the context. But it doesn't have to be complicated. But that relationship-driven process of actually writing down what it is that everybody is supposed to be doing. What are people's roles and responsibilities? What happens on the investment side? If you need any seed investment to operate, how does that work? Is it capable of being taken out? What if somebody doesn't want to be involved anymore? So you guys are all friends. This has happened to me in businesses. So you're all friends on day one, and then 3 years later, somebody wants to go and do something else. What happens? Now, it is far better and it is more protective of the relationship and the trust, in fact, if you deal with that at the outset. So what is a contract? So again, it's nothing to be scared of. A contract says who's going to do what, when, what happens to the money, and if there's intellectual property rights involved, what happens to them. That's it. Who does what when. That's what your fundamental contract should say. Now, in a founder's deal, it should be fundamentally no different. So your group of prospective partners, friends, family members, whoever it is, take that simple and practical approach of protecting the trust and the relationship and write it down. That's the way that I think it is better done, and it helps people in the long run.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is like you're protecting the business as well, because I've been in a situation where one of my partners in another business got really sick. So this person couldn't really perform their duties or contribute to the business. And I had to look at the liabilities in terms of decision making and how much authority do I have as a partner in order to protect the business from losing money or, you know, going out of business or things like that. So I think it's not,
Yeah.
I believe it's very important, and it's such a strong base.
Mm. So super right. It's look, part of life, and you know, if what I'm just about to say doesn't ring true now, then it never will. You know, stuff happens that we're not expecting.
Yeah.
So when you write a contract, you don't have to cater to everything, but some basic things. You know, again, the who is doing what part of things. If there
Yeah.
is going to be an exit, what happens? If there is a shift in terms of the roles that people either want or are capable of fulfilling, how does that work? And again, these are practical things in an ever-changing world that it is better to talk about and get written down.
Yeah. And I think it's a good exercise at the beginning of the business, because you can find out if someone has an issue with contracts and things like that from the beginning, you know, that is not gonna, in my personal opinion, is not gonna be healthy for the business.
I mean, that can be true. I mean, having those conversations that a lot of people put off in any case.
Yeah.
If you don't talk about something, you don't know what the other person's view is about it. If you do talk about it, they either avoid or they will tell you what they think, and then you will either be cool with that or you won't be cool with that.
Yeah.
But all of that comes out of having the conversation. So I'm a super big believer in communication. You know, it's
Yeah.
people get into business, people do whatever it is they do together because they like working with people. They like the communication. They like the concept or the business model or whatever it is. I mean, that tends to be what I see in people. And it certainly has always been there in any businesses
Yeah.
I've been involved in setting up or running.
I think, Mark, as well, people get intimidated, especially in the startup phase. They think to set up like the full legal foundation might be expensive.
I have a little
I
visitor.
can see we have a visitor.
Well,
Visitors are allowed in our
I
show.
have a little visitor. She comes
Hello.
in all the time to say hello. Oh no! You see how things can go wrong? Oh no!
You need a legal contract to protect your dog.
Shall I try and fix that tomorrow? Maybe. Yes. Okay. I'll try and do that. So, do you want to say hello?
Hello.
This is Calfas. Say hi. This is
Hi.
Sky. She's in her gym jams already. So, come on, go back and
Bye,
see. Go back
Sky.
and see, mummy. Bye bye, my love. See what a calamity. So yeah. So
So
I took
see,
her.
you just had to go through something that a lot of women go through, and I love the fact that you just like embraced it. You know, kids coming saying hello. I love that.
It's my little assistant who comes in on and off during the whenever I'm around work. Where everybody's working at home these days, so
So
we're it's actually a blessing to remember all the good things. So she can pop in 10 times a day, and it's
yeah,
okay
yeah.
with me.
So Mark, I just want you to tell people who start, especially in the startup phase, is it expensive as they claim? They get terrified because there's a fight in the market that everything legal is expensive, but there are ways around cutting costs and making
I mean,
sure it's
you
affordable
know,
for startup.
I mean, there are. I mean, look, everything's expensive if you do it in a particular way. If you set a scope or have an approach that is by nature complicated, then okay, it can get difficult. But with anybody that is, and it's been the same in every business I've set up, and I've been participating in myself. You take a practical approach. What I think is a mistake that a lot of co-founders make is that they are so short on money, so puzzled about what to prioritize, so driven towards the getting to market aspect or the getting
Yeah.
to pitch deck or promotion aspect if they're looking for investment, whatever it is, that they don't necessarily prioritize on some of the right things. So
Yeah.
I'm never going to tell people that you should spend money on all categories of legal expenses
Yeah.
that I could possibly think about for a business. No, you are building a business model and attract a market and so on. But what I do believe is that there are certain basic things that you can do at a very cost-effective level.
Yeah.
The second thing that I'm a big believer in, and I bore to death about this, is process. So you can decide on how your organization is going to be and the approach that you wish to take, and then you can put a number of protocols and contracts, simple contracts in place to allow you to be that kind of organization. And if you're following process is great because it actually helps to manage cost
Yeah.
whilst managing risk. So I think the error that some co-founders make is that they are so busy trying to not spend the money that they don't have, that they don't necessarily prioritize something that actually, if it does go wrong, it can be calamitous to a business. So,
Yes.
if your co-promoter, your founder relationship goes wrong and you haven't got a contractual foundation to cover that
Yeah.
occurrence, I mean, I can't use the word I would otherwise because I'm speaking to you, but you're in a mess. So it's a false economy. It really is
Yeah.
a false economy.
No, I totally agree because I look at it from a perspective of investing. You're investing and making sure your business is sustainable and it has all the foundation, the grounds to
Yeah.
protect you and make sure that your business is healthy moving forward. But at the same time, there are certain things I feel entrepreneurs or business owners can do, especially, to minimize costs. Like they need to do their own
Mm.
research, understanding, certain things, maybe work on certain things and then run it by a legal advisor or a lawyer. There's
I mean,
ways.
for sure. I mean, anybody who has set up a business as an entrepreneur, I mean, understands that, in the beginning you wear many hats, um, and having a base of work, I think makes a difference. With startups, very often they will bring things to me. Now it depends on the kind of lawyer that you've got. If you've
Yeah.
got an industry lawyer or somebody who's used to dealing with startups, they won't get offended by you saying, "Look, I worked this up on a benchmarked basis." Actually, we know what
Yeah.
that means. And could you take a look at it? I mean, that's very often the right way to do things in the beginning. And then when it starts to get more complicated and where you're looking at rounds of investment or where to incorporate and so on, I mean, again, you can still take sensible decisions, but
Yeah.
everything is scalable. Everything is scalable. Very often the businesses that people are looking at an entrepreneurial startup level are scalable. That's one of the reasons that they're looking at them. Your legal services is no different. It's scalable to where you are in the context of development of the company.
And there's also ways of making contract standards, like having a standard contract that applies to multiple things, correct?
For sure, for sure. I mean, so it's part of that protocols approach that I mentioned earlier on. You decide how you want to be with a company, and then you can set out your protocols and your standards accordingly. But having standard contracts, there's a number of different things. Number one, the kind of company setup that you have very often can be standardized in terms of your incorporation documentation. Secondly, when you then are dealing either with customer or supplier, including subcontractors, or, because we're in the Middle East, freelancers, you can have standard contracts. You don't have to have thousands of them. You can have simple, clear documents that
Yeah.
protect you in the various areas that you should be protected. And then you have standard approach, and then either you as the business owner or whoever you put in place as being a negotiator or a contract manager that use your standard contracts. And even on the other side, because the question I'm asked is, yeah, okay, but a lot of the time we by customers we get given contracts. Sure, that's true as well. But again, you can have a protocol-driven approach to that. From my point of view, anybody can give me, because I know what the risk areas are, and that's what a lot of people really want to focus. Even if it's a third-party contract that you're having to deal on, I mean, literally, there is no contract you could give, no contract, doesn't matter how long, 30 pages, 60 pages, 100 pages, don't care. There isn't a contract in the world I couldn't review at a risk level for $1,000. Just anything.
Yeah.
So managing the kind of cost that you're looking at is possible, provided that you again think about the issues, talk about the issues, and then decide what your approach is going to be. But standard contracts, yeah, great idea. I would say it actually allows companies that have limited resources to make better use of the resources that they've got. They know what issues they're focusing on. They know what any red flags are, and all of that can come out of having standard contracts within the business.
And the same applies as well to employments and HR contracts. It's so important. I remember when I started my business, you know, I had a basic contract. You know, I honestly did a lot of mistakes and I learned from it. And then I invested in like legal services. But imagine like when you hire someone, there's so many obligations on the business. There's so many obligations on the actual employee. If you don't have proper legal contract, you know, even intellectual property, which we will discuss later, business, but like in general, employment contracts is also part of it, correct?
I mean, it is. Look, we're all going through an unusual time currently. One of the heavy impacts that businesses have seen is how to deal appropriately and in an acceptable legal and contractual way with employees. So how do you do that? There's three ways. You can hope that the government writes a law that covers it, which sometimes it does, but even when you have the laws, they don't necessarily fill all the gaps in. Secondly, you can write your contracts and protocols. So let me think about it. What you know, how are you going to deal with commissions? How are you going to deal with how a person might exit? Are you going to set up some kind of a stock option arrangement to allow people to participate in the success of the business? What if the business is based on some kind of creative or technological innovation? How do you protect that? Well, partly IP provisions, partly confidentiality, but then partly being practical about how you do all of that. And then where do you put it? Do you put all of this in the contract? Not necessarily. You may have your basic terms, who does what when stuff, set out in a contract, but then you may have protocols, you may have an employment handbook, and those documents will change over time. And again, you can tie those back into your contract. So they're actually part of the contractual arrangement, even though they change and adapt with the business and, you know, with the craziness of the world that we live in.
Talking about the craziness in the world right now, you know, during the pandemic, we've seen great and successful numbers of businesses adapting very quickly to e-commerce and, you know, to reach more clients and expand on their reach. However, I noticed that a lot of these entrepreneurs didn't really pay attention on the legal risks that might take place when they expand very quickly, and especially when it comes to regions and things like that. So I want to know, I have concerns, but I know you have also your own points in this regards.
Look, it's completely understandable, and those who can, then, you know, then adaptability and looking to reversion, scalability in business models, okay, that's a great thing to be able to do. A lot of businesses that have had problems are those that are static, that are unable to move or adapt. So within the e-commerce sphere, I mean, e-enablement or coming up with some kind of an e-product or service delivery is a great idea if you can get it right. It does allow for scalability, it does allow for efficiency of delivery and so on. But you have to be clear about certain things. Where are you operating? What kind of company structure should I be putting this? Am I putting it in a company structure? Because probably you should. Which country am I going to set up in? That takes you into practical stuff like, I know we have to get the taxation stuff and so on, but perhaps even more important than that, am I going to get a bank account? Certain kinds of companies are not going to get an international e-trading bank account. What about payment gateways? You know, without an appropriate payment gateway, you're literally dead in the water. And different percentages and even the availability of a payment gateway will depend on the company that you incorporate and the country that it's incorporated in.
Yeah.
Big differences. And then there are a whole range of other things relating to, you know, getting the legal stuff, because if you are e-enabling, you are literally setting all of your contractual and trading arrangements in a virtual world, which
Yeah.
is great. That's the advantage. But then there are ways and means of making sure that you don't fall foul of the promises that you're making. One of the things that we've seen a lot of within the e-commerce world, I would say during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of people moving and transforming and changing and looking
Yes.
at
Very quickly.
interesting scalability. Great. But those that get it wrong, and we've had a lot of examples of that, get hit with a slightly unusual thing for a lawyer to talk about, but massive reputational damage. So
Yeah.
think about it. So if you're an e-commerce and you're delivering physical product, it's actually all to do with those protocols again that I was talking about. If you don't get your logistics scaled at the right time for the offering that you're putting out. So how many people on this session have bought something online during the
Oh,
pandemic? I'm guessing quite a few
yes.
of us. How many have had any problems with the quality of the delivery? Yeah, I have.
Many
Um,
times.
so delay, unexpected timing, I mean, you know, an unforgivable one, which is unexpected costs attaching to the delivery. And then what about stuff turning up broken? Has anybody ever ordered anything and it's turned up broken? And then
Yes,
you have
me
the
too.
returns mechanism. So in an e-commerce business that has expanded too quickly to cope with its logistics, that is
Yeah.
backing up the very good idea that they might have had, they can destroy their reputation. And we've seen some pretty big brands that have moved pretty quickly, that have had a lot of flack because the returns policy wasn't working and so on. But there are two issues to it. Obviously, when you look at something like a returns policy or the charges that are to be attached and how you describe a product, all of those are set out in laws. Any country you look at around the world, we have them in
Yeah.
the UAE, we have them in Bahrain, we have them in. But the second issue is this reputational issue, because to damage a brand that you built over time or that you're in the process of building, and as a startup, you want to take your brand to prospective investors, you want to scale
Yeah.
it up with investment at some point. So be careful and you know, don't make your life harder by
Yeah.
doing something that actually is going to damage the brand before you've even started.
Yes, especially now I see a lot of entrepreneurs, including myself, you know, we build brands and products with the aim of it being sold in 15, 20 years, you know, to international companies and things like that. And this is, if we don't really focus on the foundation from the start, we will have so many, we won't even be able to have a meeting with these big companies to discuss, you know, either franchise or expansion or selling of the companies or listing the company and all of these details.
I mean, all of that is true. And it's you know, so the world that we live in now, it's still a wonderful place, but it's very visible. So whatever you do as a branding, especially if you're operating in a tech or a digital economy context, you know, you're really very visible, and there isn't
Yeah.
really anywhere to hide in the modern world. So if you get your logistics wrong or your protocols wrong, or you get a brand impact, you know, it's going to be noticed,
Yeah.
which is why dealing with all of these things, including all the way back to your founder contract, everything
Yes.
starts at, I mean, why do we talk about it this way? So everything starts at the foundation. So you start talking about things, communicating,
Yeah.
making sure that everybody understands the who does what bit, and you start that at even at a co-promoter level.
Mark, I have a friend of mine, Wahida. She's asking a question. She says, what are a few things to be looking out for in a contract with when coming in as a co-partner?
Oh, I mean, you know, quite a few things. So the who does what stuff. So remember, even in a contractual context, you can broaden that out into any kind of a commercial relationship. Who does what when? What happens to the money? And if there's IP or tech involved, what happens to that? And remember in the IP context, we have a new gold, and that gold is data. So let's think about how to integrate that depending on what your business model is. But what kind of stuff? So what kind of issues should you be thinking about? Percentages. So at an equity level, when a company exists, who owns what percentage?
Yeah.
What are the roles and responsibilities that might attach? How are you going to manage the business? Do you leave it at shareholder level? Because very often when you're an entrepreneurial group of individuals setting a company up, shareholders and board members, directors, they tend to be the same thing.
Yeah.
But what happens if that changes? So what happens if somebody is no longer there as a manager within the business? What happens to their shareholding? Do the other shareholders or even the company, can they buy back on an exiting shareholder? What kind of valuation? Basic stuff. So do your co-founders pay themselves a salary? If so, on what basis? What if there's no money there? So I write co-founder arrangements sometimes that say, okay, we're going to have a waterfall. First of all, we have to pay the operational costs of the business until we get to a point where we have further. And then when we get to revenue, then we can readdress the issue of whether we receive salary, and if so, at what level. Decision making. Sorry, you did ask me a question. I'm giving you a shopping list now.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I think this is very beneficial.
Day-to-day decisions. So within the roles and responsibilities, how do you determine what is okay or not at the decision-making level? So do you all have equal votes? How many of you are there? Does anybody have a controlling interest at a shareholder level? If so, maybe we should look at certain decisions that can only be taken by everybody or by a bigger proportion. I would call those reserved matters. So changing the direction of the company, taking on massive lending or banking facilities, selling bits of the company. Those are kind of key things that impact on your investment. So even if it's just your time that you're putting in, there's no such phrase as just your time. Time is massively valuable these days. So, exactly. So in order to protect those things, you should make sure that everybody within the shareholder group, even if they have a small percentage, is protected in some way. Lots more things I could put on the list, but there's some initial things.
Mark, I have a friend who asked a question, which I actually wanted to talk to you about. It says, the question is two-part, and I think you answered part of it. What are the things to look for in a contract as a startup creator who is looking for an incubator? And then the second part is, and how to protect our ideas and personal brand, especially, which is IP and all that.
Okay, so I think on the first question, everything that I've said, I think at a co-founder level is relevant. The only other thing that I would mention is remember I said earlier on that you don't have to, you can have a scalable budget for your operations, and the same within legal services. So I'm advising one business at the moment, startup, really clever idea, working within the social media space. I won't tell you what it is or who it is, but clever.
If they need investors, tell me.
And they may well do. I will have a word with them. But clever idea. It's using all kinds of stuff that my kids. I have older ones than the wee one as well, that my kids understand very well. It plays to that demographic really well. But we're at the moment talking to them about things like, okay, so when we have the money, I'll come back to that phrase, when we have the money, where would we set up? This is the kind of business. It fundamentally is a digital economy business. So it doesn't particularly matter where we are. What matters is the ability to use intellectual property rights in a certain way within a social media context. So why am I saying all of this? The key thing for that group of co-founders currently is getting to investment point.
Yeah.
So the primary input that I'm giving them is to dress their pitch deck properly. So they need to put sensible things into their proposal to a prospective investor, too many P's in that, They need to put thoughtful things into any proposal to prospective investors, their pitch deck. So they're using me to make sure that they say clever things rather than things that won't look so good to an investor.
Yeah.
The idea sells itself. I don't need to help them with that. It's really clever. What I need to help them with is being able to dress it properly. Yeah. So that's what somebody like me actually helps people doing. And then when funding arrives for that next phase, then okay, then you can look at a readdressing of your whole process. So
Yeah.
now you did ask about IP and personal brand.
Yeah.
It very much depends upon the kind of business, particularly when you are looking at personal brand. Personal brand indicates that there is a public, possible digital, possible ambassadorship aspect to a business. And if that's the case, then yes, part of that goes into co-founder agreement in terms of the roles and responsibilities, the who does what stuff.
Yeah.
The second aspect is IP. So every business, you've had this conversation with me before, I think. So you know I'm very boring when I talk about intellectual property rights. I get very excited about it. I can walk
I
into a
love you
room, or
love it. I know that.
I can walk down the street, and I other people see other things as they walk around. I see intellectual property rights. It's
But
just
to me, you are the king of IP in the UAE.
but
To me.
I mean, because I've got an understand. I mean, thank you again. That's you're always terribly kind. But I mean, IP sits at the heart of everything. You just have to understand how to recognize it.
Yeah.
So, with IP, it is a matter of looking at what is important to a business, then looking at what already exists. Remember, intellectual property is a wonderful thing because it comes into existence automatically in so many ways, particularly in the digital economy. Even at a brand level, the reputation that attaches to any kind of a brand identity, it happens automatically. Now,
Yeah.
then a business has to decide how to do certain core things to protect. So whether it be, we're in a region that utilizes trademarks, brands very heavily. Copyright and other soft IP, again, is very relevant. And we are starting to develop within the region to look at other harder kinds of IP. So depending again on the kind of business that you have, there may be other aspects. But when you get into that level, it's all kind of it's an international card game. I shouldn't use that metaphor, but anyway, it is. So it's all about determining what advantage you get for the cards that you will hold in your hand, and more importantly, what the stake is, how much it's going to cost to achieve that advantage. Now, with IP, again, if you've got a clever IP advisor, they can help you get an awful lot of benefit with a little spend. So you don't need to spend 100% to get the 100% cover. You can spend 10% and get 90%. That's often the name of the game. You can get a lot of benefit from intellectual property rights, from careful contracting, careful thought, and sometimes a little bit of expenditure.
Yeah,
That's the
and
name
it
of the game.
differs from a country to country, correct, Mark? And like
Yeah,
if someone wants to protect their intellectual property.
I mean, it does and it doesn't. So the kind of protocols that I'm talking about, they will fit whatever jurisdiction that you end up scaling into, or wherever you want to set up and so on. And then from a registration point of view, then yes, it is a country by country game. Trademarks, if you want to register trademark, then you need to register it in the country you want it registered in. That's kind of the way it works. So, unless you've got a massively famous international brand, unless you're not really, we're in a few international brands, but unless you're a Coca-Cola or a McDonald's, which has automatic recognizability with wherever you are, and most of us don't have that. Then it is a matter of determining which country within which time frame you want to have some degree of protection. Because remember, with IP, you don't have to do everything. Now, again,
Yeah.
it's scalable in terms of profit and risk. That's again the game that you play. So you may say, I ask people a lot, okay, so from a trademark point of view, where's important to you? And of course, people say everywhere. And I say, yes, of course it is everywhere, but where would that be? And they say, well, we're digital economy. I mean, it literally could be anywhere. And I say, I understand that. But to give you the 100% protection you're asking, we'll break your budget for the next 10 years. So let's figure out what actually we can do with available budget. Okay. Well, within the next 3 years, in terms of a launch phase and what jurisdictions we're looking at, these are the 6 that are important. Okay. Then we can do certain base, what I call lockout protection at a much lower budget than spending that 100% to try and cover everything everywhere. You can cover quite a lot, that 80-90% I'm talking about, in the countries that matter during the period that matters. That's startups.
By the way, Mark, my friend she liked the King of IP, and she's in the creative industry here in Abu Dhabi, and she's been an activist to support talents and creativity in Abu Dhabi. And she just said that we need more IP awareness and understanding for young creatives.
I mean, that's true. I mean, it's the creative industries is, I mean, again, it is something that I've spent a lot of my career, 30 odd years being excited about. There are certain practical things, proper use of contracts when you're being commissioned, how you commercialize your output as a creator of any description, whether you be a digital creator or an artist or a creator in the written word context in all of its different areas. Basic understanding is what you said earlier on. It's absolutely what you said earlier on. So even if you're a creative, fine, but do the basic research, do have a base understanding of what areas are going to either help you or challenge you. And then when you need input in those areas, then okay, then go get it. But that initial, there's an awful lot of information. There's an awful lot of people that will help to push you in the right directions. But yes, whichever one of your friends said that, I mean, a greater understanding of some of the basics about intellectual property rights, it's fundamental to, the creative sector. It cannot be underestimated how much of a difference it will assist to do 2 fundamental things. 1, to enable commercialization of creative output. And secondly, to make sure that they don't get abused by other people who understand the rules better than they do. So that basic awareness really does help on those 2 areas. It really does.
I think, Mark, we're going to have another session completely on IP for creatives, because this is an area I feel like a lot of artists and a lot of talents really miss out. And so I think this deserves a special episode, I would say.
I mean, I think it does, because intellectual property really is cool. I mean, intellectual property comes into existence automatically through the creative process very often. As to what else you might do, registration and so on, yes, but there's a lot already happens just by somebody being creative. So when that is happening, and it can help you in those 2 areas, so commercialization of creative output and ensuring that other people don't take advantage, and it's happening automatically, and awareness thing, then yes, let's spend an hour talking about it.
Yes, I have 2 more questions, and then we can go towards the end of this. Someone asked, partnership contract versus MOA, do you need both?
Look, they're either the same thing or 2 different things. So go back to the point of co-founding. So if you are deciding to do stuff, one of which may be to incorporate a company together, then have a co-founder agreement that says what you're going to do in your various contexts. If you are going straight to company incorporation, number 1, make sure you're picking the right corporate entity and jurisdiction to set up in. But then if you're going straight to set up, then your memorandum and articles of association and or a shareholders agreement will cover quite a lot of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
With one caveat that I would add, which is that I don't know if everybody watching has noticed that we have quite a lot of free zones within the region.
Yeah.
So there weren't any when I came here, but anyway, we have one or two of them now. So
Yeah.
the problem, I guess, with some of the setup options that exist is that it's very driven by standard documentation. And I know you might say, but hang on, you said standard documentation was a good idea, and it is a good idea. But in the context of the MOA or a shareholders agreement or a partnership agreement contract, whatever you want to call it, you have to
Yeah.
still go through the thought process to make sure it's doing what you want it to do. So if you're at wherever it is, DDA, DMCC, your Jersey, Caymans, wherever it is, they will give you a form of memorandum and articles, but it may not cover all of the things that you want to cover in your partnership agreement. So
Yeah.
it just means that you've got to think it through, and then the standard documents that exist, I think, are a great idea. So long as you're answering all of the questions that you should when you're having that initial sit down as a co-founder to go through who does what when, what happens on the money stuff, and if there's IP or data involved or tech involved, then what's happening to ownership of those concepts. I hope
I
that
have
makes sense. So fundamentally what I was saying was you sometimes don't need both,
Yeah.
but so long as both of them cover all of the stuff you need to talk about, that's, I guess,
Then
what I'm saying. And sometimes you do need both, depending on where you are in terms of incorporation.
someone just told me that there are 19 free zones in the UAE.
Yes, and that's just the UAE. So then look at the replication of free zones that is occurring elsewhere. Remember, do remember that a lot of people over the years, so in the 25 years that I've been here, I was involved in a fairly large committee, admittedly, but I was involved in the drafting of the laws that set up what was Dubai Internet City at the time, so law number 1 of 2000. And a lot of countries around the region have and still do watch the UAE in terms of what to do. We've seen it in other, we've seen it in Emirates around the UAE, but then we've also seen it everywhere from North Africa through to other parts of the Gulf and so on. So, the UAE has, in the time that I've been, kind of led the way. So it is, however, true. Yes, we have kind of more free zones than most people do.
I have a final question. I hope I understood this question. It says, how patent best managed with a 50-50 partnership?
Sorry, how would what be managed?
How patent best managed with, I think what their question is like, how can they manage a patented project or a product between a partnership that have 50-50, so two people?
Several different ways of doing it. I'll give you the shorter version of the answer. Kelthon knows I talk too much, but anyway.
It's okay.
So the shorter version is that your shareholding and the roles and responsibilities sometimes will be the same, but sometimes not. So you can vary what is happening on a project-specific basis. I'll give you an example. I have one company, one group that works in the creative industries. They're actually very clever event build and management people. Now, sometimes projects come in. They have two partners, and sometimes they collaborate with others. And on a project, so in the shareholding of the business, it is 50-50. But then, depending on who is doing what within a particular project, we may vary that on a contractual basis, because you're allowed to do that between your shareholders. We may vary who is doing what and what their participation might be on a project. Now, a project to me would include patented technology. depending on the context. So
Yeah.
look, it's an adaptable world, and if you've got a clever lawyer, you can do all kinds of things at an economical level.
There's so many
So
things.
yeah, so it's the 50-50 shareholding doesn't necessarily need to be the end of the conversation, the communication relating to a project, and a project could include patented technology, for example.
Thank you, Mark. So, Mark, I want to end this by saying or asking, what would be your tips for startups, entrepreneurs, or even existing business owners when it comes to legal? Like your top tips.
Top tips. I would say, so I'll try and give you 5 or thereabouts. And no doubt I'll go over that. So be clear about the arrangements between your co-founders. That's super important. Make sure your foundation is strong, that everybody understands who does what stuff. When you are looking at investment, be very clear about the basis on which money is coming in. How does it change control? What basis is it coming in? Is it coming in at a shareholder level or a debt level? If it's a shareholder level, make sure that if your percentages drop, as they will at some point, if you're going to do that kind of a deal, make sure you're still protected, reserved matters. Make sure you're picking the right kind of company. You know, people say, oh, we're going to set up in Delaware. If you've got no contact, no context, and you're not looking to roll product or services out of the US, there's no need particularly to look at a Delaware. People get very excited within startup contexts about those kind of things. Make sure you pick the right vehicle. Standardization, standard contracts, just like you said earlier on. Make your protocols fit the approach of the business. Do think about intellectual property rights. What am I up to? Sorry, I'm up to 5 already. But make sure you think about intellectual property rights. How does it fit within the business? And accord it the right degree of focus if it actually is something of importance. Have a strategy. Most startup businesses don't have an intellectual property rights strategy.
Yeah.
They should.
Yeah.
They should. Even if it isn't a very long one, every business should have one. And then with some types of business, and particularly those that are working in creative sector or digital economy, you should have an IP strategy.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about data.
Data is important, yeah.
It is important. Maybe we can talk about that on an IP session. But you should think about the data issues. What data is being created? What is its value? And if there is value in the new gold, then make sure that you're thinking about it appropriately. And then get the people stuff right. HR, personnel issues, how people come in, how people leave, what's important to protect within the business. It's pointless saying, well, okay, I work in the creative industries and therefore I'm not going to allow this person who has always done event management and always do event management. Okay, I'm going to block them out from the industry within the GCC for 12 months. That's not practical. But what's important, key client relationships and so on. So get the employee stuff right.
To be honest, Mark, from my own personal experience, I know that in the beginning, it sounds like Mandarin, talking about legal stuff and terminology and everything. But once, as a business owner of multiple businesses, once you figure that out, it's such a smooth transition to different things. You don't have to really, basically your grounds are protected, and also you are very clear in your focus, as you mentioned. And I think a lot of people need to shift the way they think of legal things for startups or businesses, from cost to investment. You're investing in your business. And I really, really enjoyed this conversation with you. And I think this is not going to be the last legal topic we have on the show.
I always enjoy sitting down chatting with you. So I would be happy to come and chat anytime.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you, Mark, so much. Send my regards to the family. And I hope to, by the way, Mark on my speed dial for anything legal. So make sure you check him out. And he's a fellow artist and a collector. So Mark, we will be in touch soon.
All righty. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.